What's up, sports fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI right here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by Will Ragatz for a 5 matchups Wednesday because the Vikings play on Thursday this week. A quick turnaround for them coming out of the bye. So we've bumped things up in the schedule. And so, Will, a big game for the Vikings on the road in Los Angeles, trying to bounce back from a loss to the Lions at the weekend. Let's jump right in. What's the biggest matchup that will decide this weekend or this Thursday's game?
Yeah, there's a few key matchups here that we're going to talk about. The one that kind of always jumps out to me is Brian Flores going against, Sean McVay. And McVay, I don't think he has quite the same aura or flair to him that he did in like the Rams' peak days from like 2018 to 2021 when they won the Super Bowl or whenever it was. But still one of the best offensive minds in the league. A coach who's going to have his team in just about every game. The Rams are 2-4, but outside of weirdly getting blown out by the Cardinals, they've been in every game. They're 0-3 against the NFC North already. They're completing that whole slate within the first 7 games, but no losses to the NFC North, which, as we know, has some good teams by more than 6 points. So it seems like the Rams are going to be in this game. The Vikings are going to have to play well. And with Flores specifically, I'm looking at how does he bounce back from that performance against the Lions, which despite a few sacks, despite a late defensive touchdown, I think was pretty clearly the Vikings' weakest defensive performance of the season. So what adjustments are made? What adjustments can be made in 3 days of preparation, basically, to make things look a little bit different against a Rams offense that, while it's not the Lions offense, Matthew Stafford, he has a proven track record in this league. We know what he's capable of. Kyren Williams. It looks like they're going to get Cooper Kupp back, which is a big part of this because, the Vikings, every time they go against like an Amon-Ra St. Brown or they've gotten beaten in the yardage department by a lot of really good receivers this season. And Cooper Kupp, as he showed in week 1, if he's healthy, he's still one of the best receivers in the league. So just schematically, how does Flores approach this? What's the blitz rate look like? How do they adjust to stop giving up, these big chunks over the middle of the field, kind of against their zone looks that the Lions were able to just get so consistently when they scored 4 straight touchdowns in that game on Sunday.
Hey, you mentioned being close in games. They've got a negative 40-point differential despite their 2-4 record, but 30 of those points came against the Cardinals in a 31-point loss to them earlier this season. So just goes to show you how close games have been for the Rams. You mentioned Cooper Kupp, and got to ask the question, will they play him? There's reports out that they've looked to trade him as their season's kind of hitting the skids already, and the trade deadline's coming up here in a couple weeks. If they're planning on trading him, will they take the risk for a guy who's coming off a couple years of injuries?
Yeah, it's a good question. Unlike the Matthew Stafford rumors that people may have seen, the Cooper Kupp trade rumors were actually put out by reliable sources. So that's an interesting one. The Rams at 2-4. I mean, they really needed that win on Sunday against the Raiders to feel like they have some shot at turning this thing around. If they lose this game, you could really start to see them think about maybe being sellers. The window certainly seems to kind of have passed with this core. But if you win this game, I mean, you're 1 game away from 500. Like, you could talk yourself into maybe having a strong second half if you can get Cooper Kupp healthy. If you can get Puka Nacua healthy, who I believe they just opened his window to practice. He's not going to play in this game, but yeah, the Kupp thing, it's definitely interesting because they would be a lot better and more dangerous offensively if he plays on Thursday. And at 2-4, I don't think you want to just punt on the season, but yeah, coming off an injury, like you don't want to risk if you are thinking about trading him, which it seems like they are, for him to get re-injured or something like that and then be really tough to move. That wouldn't be great. So I don't know. I'm going into this assuming that he plays because I think he's a full participant in practice, and they've said that he's expected to play. So unless something changes before the game, I'm going to expect him to play, and that'll be that's not one of my 5 matchups I've written down, but whoever he's going against, Stephon Gilmore, Byron Murphy, Vikings got to have a plan for where Kupp is at all times.
Question on Brian Flores' defense. Do you have any concerns coming off that game against Detroit where Jared Goff was once again deadly accurate, only incompleted, only a couple passes, only a handful? Do you have any defensive concerns coming off of that game?
Not particularly. I think I wrote an article about this the other day. Like the Vikings just seem to have a Lions problem defensively. They just it's been 3 of their last 9 regular season games against the Lions, and the story has just been remarkably consistent with the points and the yardage that they've allowed, and Goff's numbers and St. Brown's numbers, and it's just something they haven't really been able to figure out for whatever reason. But that Lions offense is maybe the best in the league. I mean, Ben Johnson is really good. Jared Goff's been on a heater against everybody. If you look at his numbers the last month or so, Vikings were without Blake Cashman, who I think's been one of their top 5 defensive players this year. I'm not overly concerned. I think that's a bridge to revisit ahead of the Week 18 rematch against Detroit. But I think the Vikings will be fired up to play much better defensively on Thursday night.
All right, number 2 matchup that will decide Thursday night's game in Los Angeles.
Yeah, staying on the same side of the ball. I mean, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but Kyren Williams is kind of been the player that stands out on the Rams offense so far, especially since they've been thin at receiver. I mean, going back to the start of the 2023 season, nobody has more touchdowns than Kyren Williams, 24. A guy who sort of came out of nowhere a little bit early last year. Scored in every game this year. He's got 9 total touchdowns in 6 games. Really powerful runner, good vision. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. The Vikings against Jahmyr Gibbs last week, it wasn't great. A couple touchdowns for him. Huge day, 160 plus yards, I think. Shook Cam Bynum out of his shoes on that long touchdown run. And then there was the second touchdown run. The Vikings are in kind of a look against the pass, and the Lions are able to just run it right up the middle. So I think a lot of the talk will be about Stafford and Kupp and what are their futures. What does that core look like for them? Those 2 players who were so spectacularly good in that 2021 season and have been really for a long time. But Kyren Williams is a player the Vikings have to stop first and foremost on the Rams offense, because if they're able to run the ball and kind of manage the clock and get chunks. Just kind of stay on schedule. I think that gives the Rams a chance to hang in this game like they've done in most of their games, even when they're playing a team that's better than them. So if the Vikings can stop Kyren Williams, I know this isn't groundbreaking analysis, but if you stop the run, put them in tougher down and distance situations, 3rd and longs, and that'll segue us into my next matchup. But yeah, stop Kyren Williams from having a huge game, and I think the Vikings have a pretty good chance.
Yeah, take some pressure off of a pass game that it seems like it's struggled this season. Matthew Stafford only 3 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions, so they certainly need some help on that offense, and stopping Kyren Williams would go a long way to hassling things for that Los Angeles offense. Number 3 matchup for the week.
Yeah, this is going to be the Vikings just kind of pressure their pass rush against a Rams offensive line that can you, off the top of your head, name anybody on the Rams offensive line?
Not off the top of my head. No.
The 5 that they played against the Raiders were Bo Limmer, Justin Dedich, Kevin Dotson, Alaric Jackson, and Rob Havenstein. They've had a couple other guys mix in there as well this year. According to PFF, second lowest pass block grade as a team in the NFL. None of those guys are particularly good. I think some are more fine than others. Some are bordering on disaster a little bit, but none of them are really quality players. So the Vikings should be able to kind of have their way with applying pressure on Matthew Stafford. And as you mentioned, I mean, Stafford, it's tough to blame necessarily because he hasn't had Kupp, because he hasn't had Nakua. But yeah, he hasn't been great this year. Sub 60 passing grade. He's got 3 big time throws and 9 turnover worthy plays this year. When pressured, like most quarterbacks, his numbers have been really rough. He's done some good things out of play action this year, but yeah, if the Vikings can pressure him, which I think they can, with the talent that they have, Jonathan Grenard's having an unbelievable season. I mean, his game against the Lions, I don't think it's being talked about quite as much as it would have been if the Vikings had won, but he had 9 pressures in that game. He had a sack. He had a forced fumble. He set up Andrew Van Ginkel's forced fumble late in the game. he just played really, really well against a very good offensive line. An offensive line that is much better than the one he's going to see on Thursday night. So I'm expecting Grenard to have another big game. I'm expecting Van Ginkel to do good things. Even guys like Jerry Tillery, Jihad Ward. Maybe we even see Dallas Turner play more than 4 defensive snaps on Thursday night. We'll see. Pat Jones, forgot about him a little bit, but he's still tied for the team lead with 5 sacks this season. So I just think this is a mismatch on paper, the Vikings pass rush against the Rams offensive line. And again, it goes hand in hand. If you stop the run and you get this team in third and longs or whatever, the Vikings have the personnel to really fluster Stafford and make it a long night in primetime for him.
Stafford's been sacked 17 times this season, which among all quarterbacks, that's 6th most, tied for 6th most in the entire league. So obviously hasn't been a good season in front of him. Your number 4 matchup for the week that you're watching, ahead of Vikings-Rams in LA on Thursday night on Amazon.
Yeah, so as you know, if people have watched these videos, I typically will start on one side of the ball and then flip to the other. It was really hard for me to find interesting matchups with the Rams defense. It's not unlike their offensive line, where it's like, if you're a casual football fan, you probably haven't heard of a lot of dudes on the Rams defense. Aaron Donald, trust me, he's not still there. There's no Jalen Ramsey. They've got some good players. Their safeties. I mean, Cam Curl's a good player. They've got some guys. John Johnson's a good player. He hasn't been healthy. Their highest graded player is Jared Verse, rookie edge rusher. The edge rushers just never really scare you when you're looking at who the Vikings are facing because of Darrisaw and O'Neal. I'm trying to find guys. They have 2 guys named Kobe, spelled differently. One's a corner, one's a defensive tackle. Both having solid seasons, but it's not a very deep or scary defense. Troy Reeder is a guy who was on the Vikings offseason roster in 2023 and got cut before the season started. Rams picked him up on their practice squad, and now he's 3rd on their team in snaps. He plays a lot. I'd never thought he was going to be a starter again, if I'm being honest. But so that's a long-winded setup for me to say that I ended up settling on Justin Jefferson against the 100-yard mark as my 4th matchup, because he's got 3 straight games with between 81 and 92 yards. He spoke this week about how he really wants to get back over that 100-yard hump, and obviously he wants to bounce back and get a win. But it feels like Vikings' first primetime game of the year. SoFi, the Rams' corners aren't great. This feels like a potential kind of Justin Jefferson blow-up spot, which we haven't seen all year. I mean, he had 133 against the 49ers, 97 of which came on 1 catch. I think we could see 10-plus catches, 150-plus yards for Justin Jefferson here. That's not really a matchup per se in the traditional sense, but I'm grasping at things here when I'm looking at the Rams defense.
That's totally fair. I mean, after Aaron Donald retired, just doesn't feel like, and they lost Ramsey to the Dolphins. It just feels like they haven't had a whole lot of star pieces on that defense. So yeah, I like that one. Number 5 matchup. Before I ask another question on what we should expect Thursday night.
Yeah, so I did not have another one defensively. I went with for my 5th matchup, Kevin O'Connell against Sean McVay in prime time. They're not directly coaching against each other in terms of scheme and game plan stuff. I mean, it's Flores and McVay in that regard. Kevin O'Connell, I had to look up who the Rams defensive coordinator is now that Raheem Morris is gone. It's Chris Shula.
Yes, part of that Shula family. I did look as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was assuming that, but I hadn't confirmed. I'm just curious to see, from a game management and coaching decisions standpoint, what's this O'Connell-McVay matchup going to look like? These two are still really close friends. Obviously, the Rams connection together. Their first time coaching against each other, I should add, if people didn't realize that. It's the Vikings' first game against the Rams since hiring O'Connell. So it's an interesting one. How aggressive will O'Connell be going for it on 4th down? Scheming up maybe 1 or 2 of the trick plays that O'Connell loves to do. They seem to have a low success rate of hitting on those, but O'Connell, it's once every 2 weeks, once every 2 or 3 weeks, he draws one up. They tried to get Justin Jefferson throwing the ball against the Lions, and he had to scramble for it, which was smart. But will we see something like that in prime time? Will we see I don't know, just how aggressive are these two head coaches going to be? Their teams are in very different spots in the season, 5-1 against 2-4, and the Vikings really. It feels like they really need this one. Like this, just
Yeah.
overarching thoughts. It feels like this is an important game for the Vikings because if you come out 4 days after that loss to the Lions and win, especially if you win handily, it's like, okay, yeah, the Lions were very good, but so are we. Like we're gonna bounce back. We're 6-1. We're cruising here. We're gonna add before the deadline. If you lose, and then it's like, oh, we just lost twice in 5 days. We just lost to a Rams team that was 2-4 coming in. Now we're 5-2. Is the Darnold thing? Is it fading? Are we gonna we're not gonna sell before the deadline, but are we gonna not buy because we're recognizing that maybe this isn't actually a contender type year? That'll probably be too much overreaction if the Vikings do lose, but it just feels like a spot where you really want to shake off the bad taste in your mouth from the first loss and get back in the win column and keep pace with the NFC North, which just never seems to lose.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would ask, if we're gonna do trick plays, just don't do it in a moment where it's a big moment in the game. It always feels like they're drawn up at a high impact moment of the game where, yeah, if it comes off, it's gonna be a great play, but when it most likely doesn't, it's also a great play for the other team. Can we just do it like Dan Campbell did early in the game? Just try it early in the game and see if we can get it to work, because
don't do what Dan Campbell did and run a speed option fake punt. But no, you're right. They had the Ty Chandler that was going to throw the ball earlier this year, like in the low red zone. It's like, yeah, I don't know what we're doing there, but
just find a better spot to call it.
I wouldn't be surprised to see something funky, whether on special teams or offense, at some point in this primetime game. And it'd make me more comfortable if the Vikings were up by like 14 when they did it.
Yes, for sure. You didn't mention these guys, but I do have a question. Do we see Dalton Risner full go at practice the other day? Do we see him in place of Ed Ingram, who's just not been great this season at that right guard spot?
Yeah, the Rams do have a couple decent interior linemen, Kobe Turner and Braden Fiskey, who I think is on the injury report this week, but he's another rookie out of Florida State that they drafted. The Ingram situation is definitely interesting because he, again, was not particularly good against the Lions. The PFF grades, the watching the game live, looking at some of the tape, it all kind of supports the argument that he's just been the weak link on the offense this year, and maybe the coaches are seeing something different. But there's been some rumblings people have put out there. I think the Star Tribune was saying like they wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings are really considering a move to Risner, and I wouldn't be surprised either because it just feels like he brings such a higher floor in pass protection that it could be worth kind of breaking up the continuity of this offensive line. So we'll see. He practiced in full. Like he said a couple of weeks ago, he's healthy, he's ready to go 100%. He's been healthy, maybe even before he came off of IR. Just a question of who do the Vikings think gives them a better chance to win? And we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Dalton Risner at right guard, which would be, by the way, playing right guard in the NFL for the first time ever. He's always been a left guard. So it's going to be interesting, but yeah, wouldn't surprise me either way, I would say.
My last question, this came just across in the chat now. Dan Graziano of ESPN saying that there's a decent chance TJ Hockenson makes his debut Thursday night in Los Angeles. If he doesn't, then it's extremely likely the following week against Indianapolis on Sunday Night Football. What does his reinsertion into the lineup do for this offense, and how does it change how things operate for Sam Darnold?
Yeah, whether Hockenson plays Thursday or debuts Sunday Night Football against the Colts, it's just going to really help open everything up for the Vikings offense. Having that really, really talented pass-catching, athletic threat at tight end who can also block, and he can line up in line, he can line up in the slot, run routes over the middle of the field, take attention away from safeties and linebackers, and just be a big part of the game plan. Safety blanket for Sam Darnold, who a lot of times will be his first or second read, maybe second read behind Jefferson. A lot of times he'll just be there as kind of a fallback plan. It really helps, run game, pass game, just everything the Vikings want to do on offense under Kevin O'Connell just makes more sense when TJ Hawkinson's in there. I think it'll help Justin Jefferson. I think it'll help Aaron Jones, Jordan Addison. So nothing but good things will come when Hockenson's back playing, assuming that he's healthy, which obviously the Vikings aren't gonna play him before he's healthy. They've been very careful about making sure he'll be ready to go once he does play.
For sure. Looking forward to it. A big game for the Vikings, as you said, Thursday night against Los Angeles at the Rams home stadium. Looking forward to that one. We'll go read his work over on Vikings on SI. We also cover all things Minnesota sports, Twins, Timberwolves, and Badgers and Gophers as well over on Sports Illustrated as well. Looking forward to it. And Minnesota sports fans, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here on the channel. We'll be back tomorrow with our predictions for Thursday Night Football. We'll talk to you later.